On a lonely road, a stylish woman gets stranded in the middle of nowhere. A mysterious cowboy shows up to help her, changing her life in unexpected ways. Days later, he gets an offer that could risk everything. When the truth comes out, no one is ready. Subscribe to the channel before you experience this unforgettable story. The sun beat down mercilessly on the winding road through upstate New York, while Emily Harrington stared in frustration at the smoke rising from the hood of her brand new Mercedes. The navy blue silk dress, carefully chosen for the important meeting she should have been attending at that moment, now clung to her body due to the relentless heat. Her Jimmy Choo heels sank into the red earth as she paced nervously around the car. "Great, just great," she muttered, trying for the 10th time to get a signal on her cell phone. The screen persistently showed no service, as if mocking her situation. The 32-year-old executive, accustomed to controlling every aspect of her life, found herself completely at the mercy of chance. The clock showed 2:37 p.m., and she was already more than an hour late for the meeting with the shareholders of Harrington Enterprises, the company her father had built from scratch, and that now, after his retirement, was under her responsibility. Or at least partially, since Richard Mitchell, her fiancé and current CEO, insisted on making most of the important decisions without consulting her. A distant noise caught her attention. Shielding her eyes from the sun with one hand, Emily spotted a dust cloud approaching. As the distance decreased, she distinguished the silhouette of a horseman. At any other time, she would have found the scene picturesque, worthy of a Western movie. But at that moment, her heart raced with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The approaching man had an imposing presence on his horse. He wore a checkered shirt with rolled-up sleeves, revealing arms tanned from working outdoors, faded jeans and worn leather boots. The wide-brimmed hat protected his face from the relentless sun, but couldn't completely hide his striking features. "Need some help?" The stranger's deep, serene voice broke the silence. He dismounted with an agility that demonstrated years of practice, and Emily noticed that his eyes were an intense green, contrasting with his sunburned skin. "My car, it just stopped," she answered, trying to maintain her composure, although she was conscious of how out of place she must look in this rural setting. "I can't get a cell signal to call for assistance." "I'm Jake," he introduced himself, already walking toward the hood. "Jake Coleman. I have a ranch nearby." Emily watched, while he examined the engine with calloused hands that betrayed a life of manual labor. There was something magnetic about his precise movements and the concentrated way he analyzed the problem. "The radiator's overheated," he diagnosed after a few minutes. "I have some tools at the ranch. I can fix this in about an hour. Give or take." "An hour?" Emily ran her hands through her dark hair in a gesture of frustration. "I need to be in New York City today." "Well, ma'am," he left the sentence hanging, waiting for her to introduce herself. Emily Harrington. A flash of recognition passed through Jake's eyes, but he didn't comment. The Harrington name was known throughout the state, after all. "Ms. Harrington, your options are limited at the moment. I can help with the car, or I can take you to the nearest town to call a tow truck. But I should warn you, it's a 2-hour ride on horseback to get there." Emily looked at her expensive shoes, then at the horse and finally at Jake. There was something in his direct and honest gaze that made her trust him instantly, a feeling she rarely experienced in her world of business and appearances. "The repair, please," she decided, surprising herself with the quickness of her response. "I'll get the tools. I'll be back in 20 minutes. Jake mounted his horse again. "Stay in the shade of that tree while you wait. The sun's too strong to stay exposed." Before Emily could respond, he had already left, leaving only a cloud of red dust and a strange emptiness in the air. Following his advice, she walked to the indicated tree, a huge oak that provided generous shade. Sitting on a smooth rock under the tree, Emily took out her cell phone once more, but now it wasn't just to check for a signal. She opened her photo gallery and found the last picture she had with Richard. They were at a charity event, he in his impeccable Italian suit, she wearing a designer dress. They smiled for the camera, the perfect image of a power couple. But the photo didn't show the arguments. the constant demands, the suffocating control he exercised over every aspect of her life. The sound of horse hooves announced Jake's return. Emily quickly put away her phone, feeling strangely guilty, as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. She watched as he dismounted, carrying an old but well-maintained toolbox. Without a word, Jake began working on the engine. Emily noticed that, despite his calloused hands and rustic appearance, his movements were precise and technically competent. There was a dignity in his work that she rarely saw in the luxurious offices where she spent her days. "You don't seem like the type who usually passes through these roads," Jake commented while working. "I'm not," Emily replied, surprised to find herself comfortable enough to chat. "I was trying a shortcut to New York City. The GPS suggested this route." "GPS doesn't always know the secrets of the countryside," he smiled slightly, without taking his eyes off his work. "Sometimes the longer path is the safer one." There was something in the way he said those words that made Emily think he wasn't just talking about roads. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the clinking of tools and the occasional neighing of the horse. When the sun began to set on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Jake finally closed the hood. "There, it should work now, but I advise getting a complete checkup when you reach the city." Emily reached for her purse, looking for her wallet. "How much do I owe you for the service?" "Nothing," Jake answered simply, already putting away his tools. "Please, I insist, you spent hours helping me." "Ms. Harrington," he gently interrupted her, "in the countryside, there are still people who help others without expecting anything in return." There was something in the way he looked at her that made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. It was a disconcerting feeling for someone accustomed to always maintaining control of her emotions. "How can I thank you then?" Jake mounted his horse with the same natural elegance as before. "If you ever come back to these parts, just remember that not everyone has a price." With a slight touch of his hat in farewell, he departed, leaving Emily with many more questions than answers. The car's engine started on the first try. As she drove back to the main road, Emily found herself looking in the rear-view mirror, watching Jake's figure diminish until it disappeared on the horizon. Something had changed that afternoon, but she didn't yet know exactly what. Her cell phone began to ring as soon as she got a signal again. Richard's name flashed on the screen, along with a notification of 47 missed calls. Emily hesitated before answering, remembering Jake's serene gaze. For the first time in a long time, she questioned the direction her life had taken. The sun had already set when she finally answered the phone, but the seed of doubt had already been planted in her heart, and like seeds in the countryside, it was destined to grow stronger than anyone could imagine. Emily parked her car in the garage of the luxurious corporate building in the heart of New York City. It was already past 9 p.m. The mirrored building reflected the city lights, creating a surreal contrast with the rural landscape she had left behind just a few hours ago. Her footsteps echoed through the nearly empty lobby as she headed to the executive elevator. On the 25th floor, the lights in the president's office were still on. Emily took a deep breath, preparing herself for what she knew would come. Richard was standing by the window, a glass of whiskey in hand, observing the city spread out below. Upon hearing the sound of her heels, he turned slowly. Finally decided to show up. His voice was controlled, but Emily knew that tone well. It was the prelude to a storm. "I cancelled the meeting with the Japanese. Do you know how much that cost us?" "Richard, my car broke down in the middle of nowhere. I had no cell signal to let you know," she explained, keeping her voice firm. "But I managed to solve the problem, and I'm here now." "Solve the problem?" He raised an eyebrow, approaching. "And how exactly did you, who barely knows where the gas tank is, solve a mechanical problem?" Emily hesitated for a moment, the image of Jake appearing in her mind. "A local resident helped me." Richard studied her for a few seconds, his blue eyes cold as ice. "A local resident," he repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "And this local resident didn't have a phone, couldn't have contacted me?" "No, he didn't," Emily replied, feeling an inexplicable need to protect the memory of that encounter. He was a simple man, a farmer. Richard's laugh was cutting. A farmer, of course, the Harrington heiress being rescued by a country bumpkin. What a lovely story to tell at cocktail parties. Emily felt her blood boil. That country bumpkin, as you say, had more dignity and competence than many executives I know. The smile disappeared from Richard's face. In 3 steps he was in front of her, his domineering presence filling the space. You're defending a stranger? Someone who probably only helped because he recognized your last name? He refused. To accept payment, Emily retorted, surprising herself with her own boldness. And not everyone is driven by self-interest, Richard. Don't be naive, Emily. He grabbed her arm with controlled force. In this world, everything has a price. You, more than anyone, should know that. The words hit Emily like a slap. She knew exactly what he was referring to, the agreement her father had made years ago when the company was on the brink of bankruptcy. Richard, then a young and brilliant executive, had saved the Harringtons from ruin in exchange for a place in the presidency and her. "Let go of me," she ordered, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm tired and need to go home." "Your home is with me," Richard reminded her, but released her arm. "The apartment we bought together, remember? Where we should have been living for months if you hadn't insisted on keeping that private refuge of yours." The penthouse apartment that Emily maintained was her last vestige of independence, the only place where she could breathe without feeling the weight of expectations and obligations. Richard had been pressuring her to sell it since their engagement, but she had always resisted. "I need space," she replied, heading to the door. "You of all people should understand that." "Space?" Richard laughed humorlessly. "What happened to you today, Emily? A simple mishap on the road and suddenly you're talking like a rebellious teenager?" Emily stopped with her hand on the doorknob, remembering Jake's serene gaze, the way he spoke about helping without expecting anything in return. "Maybe I'm beginning to see things more clearly." "Clarity," Richard poured himself more whiskey. "Let me give you some clarity then. Tomorrow we have a board meeting at 9 a.m. Don't be late. And Emily, she turned to face him. "Wear something appropriate. That dress I chose for you last week would be perfect." The elevator descended in silence, reflecting Emily's image in its mirrored walls. She observed her own reflection. The impeccable makeup, the designer dress, the expensive shoes, all chosen to project an image of power and control. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like a doll in a luxury house, manipulated by invisible strings. In her apartment, hours later, Emily was on the balcony, observing the illuminated city. The contrast between the peace she had felt that afternoon in the countryside and the constant tension of her life in New York City was stark. She took her tablet and, on impulse, searched for Jake Coleman Ranch, New York. To her surprise, she found some old news articles. Jake was more than a simple farmer. He was a renowned horse breeder, known for his natural methods of training and breaking in horses. He had refused million-dollar offers for his property, preferring to maintain the traditional work he had inherited from his father. One photo in particular caught her attention. Jake mounted on a majestic black horse, his profile silhouetted against the sunset. The image perfectly captured the natural dignity she had perceived in him, something that all the money in the world couldn't buy. Her cell phone vibrated with a message from Richard. "Don't forget the red dress tomorrow, and please, arrive early, so we can review the presentation." Emily looked at the message, then at the photo of Jake, and felt something awaken in her chest, a feeling of restlessness, a desire for something more authentic. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to question not only her relationship with Richard, but the entire path her life had taken. That night, her dreams were populated by open fields, wild horses, and a pair of green eyes that seemed to see beyond all the masks she had built over the years. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered that not all paths needed to be straight, and not all choices needed to have a price. The sun had barely risen when Emily woke up, feeling strangely restless. The images from the dream still danced in her mind. Open fields, the sound of hooves against the earth, and those green eyes that seemed to see into her soul. She shook her head, trying to push away these thoughts. Today was the board meeting day and she needed to be focused. As she got ready, her eyes fell on the red dress that Richard had chosen. It was elegant, expensive, and perfectly suitable for an executive of her caliber. But for the first time, she felt uncomfortable just looking at it. In an impulse that she herself didn't understand, she opted for a navy blue pantsuit, professional but much closer to her true style. In the mirror, adjusting the pearl necklace that had been her mother's, Emily really saw herself for the first time in months. The brown eyes that stared back at her seemed different, as if something had awakened inside her. "What's happening to me?" she murmured to her reflection. Her phone vibrated with a message from Richard. "I'm waiting for you in the parking lot. Don't forget the reports." Emily took a deep breath, grabbed her folder and left, feeling as if she were about to enter a gladiator's arena. In the car, Richard barely looked at her, focused on his tablet. "I hope you reviewed the presentation." "As I asked," he commented without raising his eyes. "Yes, Richard, everything's ready," Emily replied, keeping her voice firm. He finally looked at her, frowning when he noticed her outfit. "I thought I told you to wear the red dress." "This suit is more appropriate for today's meeting," she replied, surprising herself with her own boldness. Richard studied her for a moment, a mix of irritation and curiosity in his gaze. "You've been different since yesterday. What really happened on that road, Emily?" Before she could answer, the car stopped in front of the imposing Harrington Enterprises building. "We'll talk about this later," Richard decreed, exiting the vehicle. The meeting room on the top floor was full when they arrived. The board members, mostly men over 50, were talking in small groups. Emily noticed the approving looks she received from some of the few women present. Clearly, she wasn't the only one who preferred a more sober look to the excessive glamour that Richard always encouraged. The meeting began promptly at 9 a.m. Richard, as always, dominated the presentation, talking about new projects, expansions, and possible acquisitions. Emily observed, taking notes and occasionally complimenting with data that she knew were crucial, but that her fiancé tended to neglect. It was during the presentation of the last quarter's numbers that something caught Emily's attention. A subtle but significant discrepancy in the financial reports, something she hadn't noticed before, but now, with eyes more open since the encounter with Jake, seemed to jump off the screen. "Richard," she interrupted, her voice calm but firm, "I think there's an error in the numbers from the southern branch." The room fell silent. Richard stared at her, a mixture of surprise and irritation on his face. "What are you talking about, Emily?" With renewed confidence, she stood up and walked to the projection screen. "If you look here," she pointed to a series of graphs, "the production numbers don't match the sales reports. There's a difference of almost 15% that isn't being accounted for." The board members leaned forward, murmuring among themselves. Richard tried to regain control of the situation. "It must be just a typing error. We'll verify this later and—" "No, Richard," Emily interrupted him, her voice stronger than ever. "This isn't a simple typing error. These numbers indicate that something much more serious is happening. We need a complete audit of all branches." The silence that followed was deafening. The board members exchanged worried looks, while Richard seemed to have been hit by lightning. "Emily," he hissed, "I think you're overreacting. Let's discuss this in private and—" "No," she replied, looking directly into his eyes. "This needs to be discussed now with the entire board present. It's our responsibility to ensure the integrity of this company." It was at this moment that Mr. Harrington, Emily's father and honorary chairman of the board, who until then had been observing everything in silence, spoke up. "My daughter is right. If there's any suspicion of irregularity, we need to investigate thoroughly." The next 2 hours were intense. Emily led a detailed analysis of the reports, exposing more and more discrepancies. With each new revelation, she felt a mixture of horror at what she was discovering and pride at finally acting as the leader she always knew she could be. Richard, on the other hand, was growing increasingly pale and agitated. His attempts to explain or minimize the discoveries sounded increasingly weak and desperate. When the meeting finally ended, with the unanimous decision to initiate a complete audit of all company operations, Emily found herself surrounded by board members congratulating her on her insight and courage. "You saved us from disaster, my dear," said her father, embracing her with evident pride. "I always knew you had it in you." Richard, however, didn't share the general enthusiasm. When they were finally alone in the meeting room, he exploded. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Do you have any idea what you just caused?" Emily faced him, feeling a strength she didn't know she possessed. "I'm doing my job, Richard, protecting my family's company and my father's legacy. The question is, what have you been doing?" The look he gave her was pure hatred. "You have no idea of the forces you're playing with, Emily. This will have consequences." "I'm counting on it," she replied, picking up her folder and heading to the door. Before leaving, she turned one last time. "Oh, and Richard, I think we need to reconsider our engagement." As the elevator descended, Emily felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She knew she had just changed the course of her life, and possibly the entire company. The consequences would be enormous, but for the first time in years, she felt she was on the right path. As she left the building, the afternoon sun momentarily blinded her. Blinking to adjust to the brightness, she had a sudden vision of Jake's ranch, the open fields, and the endless sky. And at that moment, she knew exactly what she needed to do. She took out her cell phone and, ignoring the dozens of messages and missed calls, dialed a number. "Hello, Nancy. It's me, Emily. Remember that journalist friend of yours? I think I have a story that will interest him a lot." As she walked to her car, Emily felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The future was uncertain, possibly dangerous, but for the first time in a long time she felt truly alive. And somewhere in the back of her mind, the image of a pair of green eyes and a sincere smile gave her the strength she needed to face whatever might come next. The days following the board meeting were a whirlwind for Emily. The audit was in full swing, revealing a complex web of suspicious transactions and misappropriated funds that extended far beyond what she had initially imagined. Each new discovery was like a punch to the stomach, but it also reinforced her determination to clear her family company's name. Richard had disappeared shortly after the meeting, claiming an urgent business trip. Emily knew it was only a matter of time before he returned, probably with some plan to try to reverse the situation or, worse, silence her. On a particularly tense afternoon, while reviewing piles of documents in her office, Emily received an unexpected visit. Nancy, her best friend since college days and now a respected lawyer, entered without ceremony, carrying a thick folder. You won't believe what we discovered," said Nancy, throwing the folder on the desk. "Remember Raphael, my journalist friend? He has sources in the financial underworld. What's happening at Harrington is just the tip of the iceberg." Emily leafed through the documents, feeling her blood freeze. There was evidence of connections between Richard and groups known for money laundering, as well as indications of bribery of inspectors and even politicians. "My God, Nancy, how could I have been so blind?" murmured Emily, running her hand through her hair in a gesture of frustration. Nancy placed her hand on her friend's shoulder. "Don't blame yourself. Richard is a born manipulator. He fooled everyone, including your father." At that moment, Emily's phone rang. It was the receptionist, advising that Richard had arrived and was on his way to her office. Emily exchanged a worried look with Nancy. "Stay here," she asked her friend. "I need to face this, but I don't want to be alone." Seconds later, Richard entered the room like a storm. His impeccable suit couldn't hide the fury in his eyes. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he practically shouted. "Years of work, carefully cultivated connections, all down the drain because you decided to play the heroine." Emily stood up, facing him with a calmness she didn't know she possessed. "What I did was prevent my family's company from being used for criminal activities, and from what I'm seeing, I arrived just in time." Richard laughed, a cold sound without humor. "Criminal? Emily, darling, this is how the business world works. Your father knew that when he brought me in to save the company. Why do you think he never questioned my methods?" "My father would never agree to this," Emily retorted, but a seed of doubt was planted in her mind. "Don't be naive," Richard approached, his voice now dangerously soft. He knew exactly what was going on. Why do you think our engagement was so important to him?" The words hit Emily like a slap. Memories of strange conversations with her father, of decisions that never made sense, began to fit together in a disturbing way. "It's time to grow up, Emily," Richard continued, extending his hand to touch her face. "We can fix this, together, as it always should have been." For a moment, Emily felt tempted. It would be so easy to go back to the comfort of the familiar, pretend that none of this had happened. But then, like a flash, the image of Jake appeared in her mind, the honesty in his eyes, the dignity in his work, and she knew she couldn't go back. "No, Richard," she said, pushing his hand away. "It's over. The audit will continue, and I will personally ensure that every cent diverted is returned and every person involved is held accountable." Richard's face contorted into a mask of fury. "You have no idea what you're doing. There are powerful people involved in this, people who won't hesitate to." "To do what, Richard?" Nancy's voice cut through the air. She had recorded the entire conversation on her cell phone. "Threaten. Use violence. I'm sure the police and the press would love to hear about these powerful people." Richard turned pale, looking from Emily to Nancy. For a moment, it seemed like he was going to lunge at them, but then something in his face changed. A cold smile formed on his lips. "You won this battle, Emily, but don't forget, I built this empire as much as your family did, and I won't give it up so easily." With those words, he left the room, leaving a heavy silence behind. Emily collapsed in her chair, shaking. Nancy ran to hug her. "You were amazing, Em, but this is far from over. We need to act fast." In the days that followed, Emily worked tirelessly. With Nancy's help and a team of trusted lawyers and accountants, she began to dismantle the corruption network that Richard had built. Each new document, each testimony from previously silenced employees, revealed the extent of the damage. But the hardest blow was yet to come. One night, while working late in her office, Emily received a call from her mother. Her father had suffered a heart attack when confronted with the evidence of his involvement in Richard's schemes. Driving to the hospital, Emily felt as if her world was crumbling. Everything she believed in, everything she thought she knew about her family and her life was being put to the test. In the hospital room, looking at her father's pale face, Emily felt a mixture of love, anger, and disappointment that threatened to suffocate her. How could she move forward knowing what she knew now? It was in this moment of despair that her cell phone vibrated with a message. It was from an unknown number, but the content made her heart leap. "Heard about the problems at your company. If you need a place to think or just breathe, my ranch is always open. Jake." Looking out the hospital window at the bustling city outside, Emily felt a sudden need to escape, to find some kind of clarity away from all this. Perhaps, she thought, it was time to accept that unexpected invitation and discover what destiny had in store for her away from the shadows of New York City. The sun had barely risen when Emily left New York City, driving her car down the same road where weeks ago a casual encounter had changed the course of her life. The city was left behind, its skyscrapers diminishing in the rearview mirror, while the landscape gradually transformed into verdant fields and picturesque farms. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The image of her father in the hospital bed, fragile and defeated, painfully contrasted with the memories of a childhood where he was her invincible hero. The revelations of the past few days had shaken the foundations of everything she believed. Soon after a few hours of driving, guided by the instructions Jake had sent, Emily spotted the entrance to the ranch. A rustic wooden gate with the name Sunrise Fields carved into it marked the entrance to the property. As she passed through it, she felt as if she were entering another world. The dirt path wound through towering trees, opening into a vast field where horses grazed peacefully. In the distance, a two-story farmhouse with a wide porch seemed to come straight out of a postcard. Jake was waiting on the porch, leaning against one of the wooden columns. He wore jeans, a checkered shirt, and boots, an image of simplicity. That contrasted strongly with the corporate world Emily had left behind. "Welcome to Sunrise Fields," he said, descending the steps to greet her. His smile was gentle, but his eyes showed a deep understanding, as if he could read the emotional storm she was going through. "Thank you for having me on such short notice," Emily replied, suddenly conscious of her impeccable pantsuit and high heels, so out of place in this environment. "Sometimes we need a place to breathe and think," Jake said, picking up the small suitcase she had brought. "Come, I'll show you to the guest room." The interior of the house was a perfect reflection of the exterior, welcoming, rustic, with solid wood furniture and decor that blended old family pieces with modern touches. Emily felt an immediate peace upon entering, as if the environment itself invited her to lower her defenses. The guest room was upstairs with a window that opened to the fields. "Rest a bit," Jake suggested. "When you're ready, I'll be downstairs. There's an orchard behind the house that I think you'll like." Alone. In the room, Emily finally allowed the tears long contained to flow freely. She cried for her father, for Richard's betrayal, for the lost innocence, and for the weight of the responsibilities that now fell entirely on her shoulders. Hours later, after a refreshing shower and dressed in more suitable clothes for the environment, jeans and a simple shirt that she had brought almost as an afterthought, Emily came downstairs. She found Jake in the kitchen, preparing what appeared to be a snack. "I thought you might be hungry," he said, placing on the table a plate with fresh fruits, cheese, and homemade bread. "Eating well is the first step to putting your thoughts in order." Seated at the kitchen table with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee hanging in the air, Emily felt comfortable enough to talk. She told Jake about the discoveries at the company, Richard's betrayal, her disappointment with her father. He listened attentively without judging, offering only an occasional nod of understanding. "You know," Jake began after she finished, "there's something I've learned taking care of horses. Sometimes when an animal is scared or hurt, the best thing we can do is simply be present, offer comfort without demanding anything in return." His words touched Emily deeply. It was exactly what she needed at that moment, not advice or solutions, but simply a safe space to be herself. In the days that followed, Emily found in the ranch a refuge she didn't know she needed. She woke up early, often to watch the sunrise from the porch, a cup of coffee in her hands. She accompanied Jake in his daily tasks, learning about caring for the animals and the land, and connecting with the local community. One morning, while helping feed the horses, Emily found herself talking about her childhood, about the dreams she had before finding herself trapped in her father's expectations and Richard's manipulations. "I wanted to be a veterinarian, you know," she confessed, laughing softly. "But my father said it was a waste of my potential, that I should aim higher." Jake looked at her with a mixture of understanding and something more, something that made Emily's heart beat slightly faster. "It's never too late to follow your dreams, Emily. Sometimes we need to lose our way to find our true path." At night, seated on the porch under a starry sky like Emily had never seen in New York City, conversations flowed naturally. Jake spoke about his own journey, how he had inherited the ranch from his father and chosen to continue the family legacy, despite pressures to sell the land and seek a more ambitious life in the city. "True wealth," he said, looking at the horizon, "is in living according to your values, in doing something you love and that benefits others." His words echoed deeply in Emily. She began to question not only her father's and Richard's actions, but her own choices and priorities. What really mattered? What did she want for her future? One afternoon, while horseback riding through the fields, Emily felt a freedom she hadn't experienced since childhood. The wind in her face, the rhythm of the horse beneath her, the vastness of the sky above, all combined to create a sensation of infinite possibilities. It was at this moment, with the sun setting on the horizon, painting the sky in golden and pink tones, that Emily made her decision. She knew what she needed to do, not just regarding the company and her family, but regarding her own life. Returning to the house, she found Jake on the porch, as if he knew she would need him at that moment. "Jake," she began, her voice firm. Despite her racing heart, "I think I finally know what I need to do, and I think I'm going to need your help." Jake's smile was warm and encouraging. "I'm here for whatever you need, Emily. Always. That night, under the starry sky of the countryside, Emily began to map out the plans for her future, a future that, she now realized, could be very different and much more rewarding than anything she had ever imagined. Dawn found Emily on the farmhouse porch, a hot cup of coffee between her hands, watching the sunrise paint the sky with shades of pink and orange. The last few days at Sunrise Fields had been a journey of self-discovery, a deep dive into who she really was and what she wanted for her life. "Ready for the big day?" Jake's voice pulled her from her thoughts. He joined her on the porch, his own coffee in hand, his green eyes shining with a mixture of concern and admiration. Emily took a deep breath, feeling a determination she hadn't experienced in years. "As ready as I can be," she replied, a slight smile on her lips. The plan they had traced in recent nights was bold but necessary. Emily would return to New York, not only to face the consequences of Richard's and her father's actions, but to implement radical changes at Harrington Enterprises. After breakfast, Emily prepared for the trip back. She dressed in an elegant suit, but opted for more comfortable shoes, a small but significant change that symbolized her new perspective. "Remember," Jake said as he accompanied her to the car, "you're stronger than you think, and you have allies who believe in you." Emily hugged him, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability before resuming the leader stance she would need to be. "Thank you, Jake, for everything." The trip back to New York City was a mixture of anxiety and determination. Emily mentally reviewed each step of her plan, preparing for the challenges she would face. Her first stop was the hospital. Her father had been discharged but was still weak, recovering at home. The conversation they had was difficult, loaded with repressed emotions and painful truths. "Dad," Emily began, sitting beside his bed, "we need to talk about the future of the company and about our choices." The hours that followed were intense. Emily confronted her father about his knowledge of Richard's activities, about the questionable decisions that had put the company at risk. To her surprise, she found not defensiveness, but a man broken by the weight of his own mistakes. "I wanted to leave a legacy for you, daughter," he confessed, tears in his eyes. "But in the process, I almost destroyed everything we built." The conversation was painful but necessary. In the end, they reached an agreement. Her father would completely step away from the company, leaving Emily in total command to implement the necessary changes. With that weight off her shoulders, Emily moved on to the next challenge, an emergency meeting of the board of directors. The meeting room was tense when she entered. Anxious and curious faces stared at her, waiting to see how the Harrington heiress would handle the crisis. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emily began, her voice firm and clear, "we are here today not just to discuss a crisis, but to redefine the future of Harrington Enterprises." In the 2 hours that followed, Emily presented a detailed restructuring plan. She proposed a complete and transparent audit, the return of all misappropriated funds, and a total reformulation of the company's business practices. "It won't be easy," she admitted, "and we will certainly face resistance. But it's the only way to save not just our company, but our integrity." The debate was heated. Some board members resisted, arguing that the changes were too drastic. Others, inspired by Emily's courage, offered their full support. In the end, with a close vote, the plan was approved. Emily left the meeting exhausted but victorious. The road ahead would be difficult, but she had taken the first step. In the days that followed, Emily worked tirelessly. With Nancy's help and a team of trusted professionals, she began to implement the changes. Each revealed document, each questionable transaction exposed, was like ripping off a bandage, painful but necessary for healing. One afternoon, while reviewing some documents in her office, Emily received an unexpected visit. Richard entered, his usual air of confidence replaced by an expression of defeat. "You won, Emily," he said, tossing an envelope on her desk. "My resignation. I hope you know what you're doing." Emily faced him, feeling not anger but a strange mixture of pity and relief. "I'm doing what's right, Richard. Something we should have done a long time ago." When he left, Emily felt as if a chapter of her life was closing. She looked out the window at the city spread out below, and for the first time in weeks, allowed herself a moment of true hope. That night, alone in her apartment, Emily took her phone and typed a message to Jake. First stage completed. Thank you for helping me find the strength I didn't know I had. The response came almost immediately. You always had that strength, Emily. You just needed to remember it. I'm proud of you. With a smile, Emily allowed herself a moment of peace. The road ahead was still long and full of challenges, but, for the first time in a long time, she felt truly in control of her destiny. Looking at the illuminated city through the window, Emily made a silent promise to herself. Harrington Enterprises would become an example of ethics and responsibility in business, and she, Emily Harrington, would be the leader she always knew she could be. With that thought, she began to plan her next move. The journey was far from over, but now, with clarity of purpose and trusted allies, Emily was ready to face any challenge that might come her way. The months that followed were an emotional roller coaster for Emily. Implementing changes at Harrington Enterprises proved to be even more difficult than she had anticipated. Each day brought a new battle. Each victory was followed by a new obstacle. On a particularly tense morning, Emily was in her office, drowning in piles of reports and legal documents when her assistant rushed in. "Miss Harrington, you need to see this," she said, turning on the television on the wall. Richard's face filled the screen, his confident smile contrasting with the sensational headlines below. He was giving an exclusive interview, making serious accusations against Emily and the current management of the company. "It's a desperate attempt to cover up years of mismanagement by the Harrington family." Richard's voice sounded convincing. "Emily is using my name to divert attention from her own mistakes and those of her father." Emily felt her blood freeze in her veins. She knew Richard wouldn't accept defeat easily, but she hadn't expected such a public and direct attack. In the days that followed, the media storm intensified. Newspapers, TV programs, and social media were filled with speculation and accusations. Investor confidence began to waver, and Emily saw the hard work of the past months threatened. It was in this moment of crisis that she remembered Jake's words. "True strength isn't in never falling, but in getting up every time you need to." With this inspiration, Emily decided to face the situation head-on. She organized a press conference, determined to tell her side of the story. On the day of the conference, the Harrington Enterprises auditorium was packed with journalists and cameras. Emily took the stage, feeling the weight of all eyes on her. For a moment she hesitated, feeling the familiar knot in her stomach. Then she took a deep breath and began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice was steady, despite her internal nervousness, "I'm here today not to defend myself, but to defend the truth and the future of Harrington Enterprises." In the 2 hours that followed, Emily presented concrete evidence of the irregularities discovered, explained in detail the audit process and the changes implemented. She spoke passionately about the company's new vision, focused on ethics, transparency, and social responsibility. "We made mistakes in the past, it's true," she admitted, "but we are determined to correct these mistakes and build a better future, not just for our company, but for everyone who depends on it, employees, partners, and the community." Emily's honesty and transparency surprised everyone. Journalists who came prepared for a confrontation found themselves before a leader willing to take responsibility and committed to real changes. The impact was immediate. The next day's headlines no longer spoke of scandals, but of renewal and hope. Investor confidence began to stabilize, and Emily received unexpected support from business leaders who praised her courage and integrity. In the midst of this whirlwind, Emily found time for a surprise visit to Sunrise Fields. She arrived without warning, finding Jake in the stable taking care of the horses. "Emily," he exclaimed, a smile lighting up his face upon seeing her. "What a nice surprise." She ran to embrace him, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. "I needed to see you," she confessed, "needed to remind myself of what's real." That night, sitting on the porch under the stars, Emily told Jake about the challenges she was facing. He listened attentively, offering not just support but practical advice based on his own experience in maintaining the integrity of his family business. "You know," Jake said, looking toward the horizon. Sometimes we need a storm to clear the air. What you're doing, Emily, is brave and necessary. Jake's words, along with the peace of the ranch, renewed Emily's strength. She returned to New York with renewed energy, ready to face the challenges that were still to come. The following months were of intense work. Emily personally led transparency initiatives, organized meetings with employees at all levels to hear their concerns and ideas, and established new ethical standards for all company operations. One of her boldest initiatives was the creation of a corporate social responsibility program. Harrington Enterprises began investing in education and environmental preservation projects, transforming old harmful practices into positive actions for the community. The path wasn't easy. There was resistance, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But with each obstacle overcome, Emily's determination grew. She discovered in herself a resilience she didn't know she possessed. 1 year after the beginning of her transformation journey, Emily was again before the board of directors. This time, however, the climate was completely different. Faces that once showed skepticism now displayed respect and admiration. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emily began, her voice full of confidence, "a year ago, we began a journey that many thought impossible. Today, I'm proud to say that we have not only survived, but we are thriving." She presented the year's results. Profitability had recovered, the company's reputation was stronger than ever, and employee engagement was at a record level. "But our journey is far from over," she continued. "We have the opportunity to not only be a successful company, but to be an example of how business can be conducted with ethics and responsibility." When the meeting ended, Emily found herself surrounded by board members offering congratulations and support. She accepted the compliments gracefully, but her thoughts were already on the next steps, the new goals she wanted to achieve. That night, in her apartment, Emily looked out the window at the city that never sleeps. New York City, with all its complexities and challenges, seemed different now. It was no longer a battlefield, but a place of possibilities. Taking her phone, she typed a message to Jake. "We've weathered the storm. Thank you for being my lighthouse." The response came almost instantly. "You're the captain of your ship, Emily. I just illuminated the path you chose to follow." With a smile, Emily allowed herself a moment of true satisfaction. The future was still uncertain, but now she faced it not with fear, but with expectation. Harrington Enterprises' transformation journey was just beginning, and Emily was ready to lead the way. The success of Harrington Enterprises under Emily's leadership did not go unnoticed. Invitations for lectures, interviews, and participation in business forums started to arrive with increasing frequency. Emily found herself at the center of attention in the corporate world, not just as the heiress who saved the family empire, but as a visionary leader who was redefining the role of companies in society. On an autumn morning, Emily was in her office, reviewing the final details of a presentation she would make at an important corporate sustainability congress, when her assistant entered with an envelope in hand. "Ms. Harrington, this arrived for you. Special delivery." Emily opened the envelope, curious. Inside, she found an elegant invitation to a gala dinner in New York, organized by the UN to discuss global corporate responsibility initiatives. It was an incredible opportunity, a recognition of the impact her actions were having beyond the borders of the United States. As she contemplated the invitation, her phone rang. It was Jake. "Hi, Emily, how are you?" His voice sounded warm, even through the line. "Jake, it's good to hear your voice," she replied, feeling an involuntary smile form on her lips. "I'm good. I just received an incredible invitation to an event in New York." "Wow, that's wonderful. You deserve all the recognition." Jake seemed genuinely happy for her. "Actually, I was calling to invite you to something a bit different. We're organizing a festival here at the ranch to celebrate the harvest and raise funds for rural schools in the region. I thought you might be interested in participating." Emily felt her heart tighten. The festival would be on exactly the same date as the dinner in New York. She found herself faced with a choice that seemed to symbolize much more than just two conflicting events. I would love to go, Jake. But she hesitated, looking at the invitation on her desk. But you have important commitments, I understand. Jake completed, his voice gentle. Don't worry, Emily. I know your work is fundamental and makes a difference to many people. After hanging up, Emily found herself immersed in conflicting thoughts. On one side, the opportunity to expand her influence, to take the ideas she was implementing at Harrington to a global stage. On the other, the connection with her roots, with the simplicity and authenticity she had rediscovered at Jake's ranch. The days that followed were an internal battle for Emily. She found herself looking out the window of her office, remembering the open fields of the ranch, the smell of damp earth after rain, Jake's sincere smile. One afternoon, while walking through the park near her apartment, seeking clarity, Emily encountered an elderly woman feeding pigeons on a bench. The woman, with her grey hair and kind eyes, smiled at her. You seem to be carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, young lady, the woman commented. Emily, surprising herself, sat down next to the woman and shared her dilemma. Nay, woman listened attentively and then said, You know, dear, in my long life I've learned that the most important decisions are rarely between right and wrong. Usually they're between two rights. The question is, which one makes your heart sing? The woman's words echoed in Emily's mind for days. She found herself going over the past few months, the changes in her life, the transformations in the company. She realized that amid all the success and recognition, what really made her feel alive were moments of genuine connection with her team, with the communities they were helping, and especially with Jake. On the eve of the day she would need to depart for New York, Emily made her decision. She called her assistant and asked her to cancel her participation in the UN dinner, sending one of her most promising directors in her place, along with a letter explaining her absence. Next, she picked up the phone and called Jake. Hello? Jake, is there still room for one more at the festival? The joy in his voice was palpable. For you, Emily, there's always room. The next day, Emily drove down the familiar road that led to Sunrise Fields. As she approached the ranch, she felt a wave of peace and certainty envelop her. The festival was in full swing when she arrived. Children ran between colorful stalls. The aroma of homemade food filled the air, and live music echoed through the fields. Jake found her as soon as she parked her car. Without saying a word, he enveloped her in a warm embrace. Welcome back, he whispered. That night, as they danced under the stars, surrounded by the community that Jake loved so much, Emily felt that she had finally found her place in the world. It wasn't New York nor the boardrooms in Manhattan. It was here, with her feet on the ground and her heart open to possibilities. You know, she said to Jake, as they twirled to the sound of a country song, I think I finally understood what you meant about true wealth. Jake smiled, his green eyes shining in the lantern light. And what did you discover? That it's in the connections we make, the lives we touch, Emily replied, feeling each word resonate in her heart. And that sometimes the greatest impact we can have is precisely in the places and with the people we least expect. As the party continued around them, Emily knew she had made the right choice. The path ahead was still uncertain, but now she understood that her journey wasn't just about transforming a company, but about finding a balance between her professional ambitions and her search for an authentic and meaningful life. And there, in Jake's arms under the starry countryside sky, Emily felt that she was exactly where she should be, ready to write the next chapter of her story, a chapter that promised to be the most exciting and rewarding of all. Dawn found Emily on the ranch porch, a steaming cup of coffee in her hands, observing the awakening of nature around her. The night of the festival still echoed in her mind, bringing a smile to her lips. She felt invigorated, as if she had rediscovered a part of herself that had been dormant for a long time. Jake joined her, bringing his own cup of coffee. Sleep well? He asked, his affectionate gaze meeting hers. Better than I have in a long time, Emily replied, feeling a wave of affection as she looked at him. The days that followed at the ranch were a mix of work and pleasure. Emily helped Jake with daily tasks, learning more about sustainable farm management and connecting with the local community. At the same time, she maintained contact with her team in New York, managing the most urgent matters of Harrington Enterprises, remotely. It was during this period that an idea began to form in her mind, a way to unite her two worlds, to create a bridge between the corporate universe she knew so well and the meaningful simplicity she had found in the countryside. 1. Afternoon, while helping Jake fix a fence, Emily shared her thoughts. "Jake, I've been thinking, what if we could create an exchange program between Harrington executives and rural communities like this one?" Jake stopped what he was doing, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "Imagine," Emily continued, excited, "bringing corporate leaders to spend time here, learning about sustainability, connection with the land, community values, and in exchange, offering management and technology training for rural communities." Jake's eyes lit up with her enthusiasm. "That could be amazing, Emily, a true exchange of knowledge and perspectives." In the days that followed, they refined the idea together. Emily saw potential not just for Harrington, but to create a model that other companies could follow. It was a way to promote mutual understanding, break prejudices, and create innovative solutions for social and environmental challenges. When it was time to return to New York, Emily felt energized and full of purpose. Saying goodbye to Jake was difficult, but both knew this wasn't a farewell but the beginning of something new. Back in her office at Harrington, Emily convened a meeting with her leadership team. She presented the idea of the exchange program dubbed Bridges of Tomorrow. The initial reaction was mixed. Some more conservative executives expressed skepticism, questioning the practical value of such an initiative. Others, especially the younger ones, were enthusiastic about the prospect of such a unique experience. "I understand the concerns," Emily said, facing the objections calmly. "But I believe this program can bring immeasurable benefits, not just in terms of social responsibility, but innovation and leadership development." After hours of discussion and refining the proposal, the Bridges of Tomorrow project was approved as a pilot. Emily knew the real work was just beginning. The weeks that followed were intense. Emily divided her time between New York and the countryside, working tirelessly to establish the foundations of the program. She met with community leaders, negotiated partnerships with other farms and ranches, and developed a curriculum that blended corporate practices with traditional wisdom. The first group of executives departed for the countryside with a mixture of expectation and apprehension. Emily accompanied them, anxious to see how they would react to the experience. The results exceeded her expectations. She saw executives who had never gotten their hands dirty, discovering the satisfaction of planting a garden. She observed leaders accustomed to making quick decisions, learning the value of patience when dealing with animals, and most importantly, she witnessed the birth of new friendships and understandings between worlds that seemed so distant. In parallel, members of rural communities who visited Harrington headquarters brought fresh perspectives and innovative ideas. Their practical wisdom and connection with nature inspired new sustainability and efficiency projects. The success of the pilot didn't go unnoticed. Soon, other companies began to show interest in the model. Journalists sought out Emily for interviews, wanting to know more about this innovative approach to corporate responsibility and leadership development. In the midst of all this whirlwind, Emily found moments for reflection. One night, after a long day of meetings, she found herself on the balcony of her apartment in New York, looking at the city lights. She picked up her phone and called Jake. "How are things there?" she asked, feeling a wave of longing as she heard his voice. "Busy, but good," Jake replied. "People here are still talking about the last group of executives. I think we're really making a difference, Emily." They talked for hours, sharing stories, challenges, and dreams for the future of the program. Emily felt her heart fill with gratitude and affection. She had found not just a business partner in Jake, but someone who understood her deeply, who challenged her to be her best version. When she finally hung up, Emily looked again at the city below. New York, with all its chaos and energy, no longer seemed like such a distant place from Jake's ranch. She was building bridges, not just between companies and communities, but between different parts of herself. The road ahead was still full of challenges. Balancing the demands of Harrington with the growth of Bridges of Tomorrow wouldn't be easy. There were resistances to overcome both in the corporate world and in rural communities. And her relationship with Jake, still developing, brought its own complexities. But for the first time in her life, Emily felt that she was exactly where she should be, doing exactly what she should do. She had found a purpose that united her business skills with her desire to make a real difference in the world. With a smile, Emily made a mental note for her next trip to the ranch. There was much work to be done, many bridges to be built, and she could hardly wait to see where this journey would take her next. The success of the Bridges of Tomorrow program brought not only recognition, but also new challenges for Emily and Harrington Enterprises. As the project gained national visibility, the pressure on Emily increased. She found herself balancing the growing demands of the program with the daily management of the company, while trying to maintain her connection with Jake and the world she had discovered in the countryside. On a spring morning, Emily was in a video conference with international investors when her assistant hurriedly entered the office, a concerned look on her face. "Miss Harrington, I think you need to see this," she said, handing a tablet to Emily. On the screen, an eye-catching headline jumped out. "Environmental scandal hits farms partnered with Harrington Enterprises." The article alleged that some of the rural properties involved in the Bridges of Tomorrow program were involved in illegal deforestation and improper use of pesticides. Emily's heart sank. She knew the accusations were false. She had personally visited all the partner properties and trusted their sustainable methods. But the mere suggestion of impropriety could cause irreparable damage to the program and the company's reputation. "Cancel my commitments for the rest of the day," Emily instructed her assistant, "and call an emergency meeting with the communications team and the lawyers." The hours that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Emily and her team worked tirelessly to gather evidence that refuted the accusations. They contacted the partner farms, collected environmental data, and prepared an official response. In the midst of the chaos, Emily's phone rang. It was Jake. "Emily, I just saw the news. How can I help?" The concern in his voice was evident. "Jake, I'm so relieved to hear your voice," Emily sighed. "I need you to gather all the documentation we have on sustainable practices at the ranch and other partner properties. We'll need everything to combat these accusations." "Consider it done," Jake replied. "And Emily, don't let this shake your confidence. What we're doing is too important to be brought down by lies." Jake's words gave Emily the strength she needed. In the days that followed, she led an aggressive transparency campaign. The Harrington Enterprises opened its doors to journalists and environmentalists, inviting them to visit the partner farms and verify the sustainable practices in action for themselves. Emily gave interviews, facing difficult questions with honesty and firmness. She not only defended the program but used the opportunity to educate the public about the importance of sustainable agriculture and cooperation between urban and rural sectors. The crisis reached its peak when Emily was invited to a televised debate with one of the most vocal critics of the program. The night before the debate, she couldn't sleep. Millions of people would be watching, and the future of Bridges of Tomorrow could depend on her performance. Unable to find peace in her city apartment, Emily did something impulsive. She got in her car and drove all night to Jake's ranch. She arrived at dawn, exhausted but determined. Jake received her on the porch, asking no questions, only offering a comforting embrace. They spent the morning walking through the fields, Emily absorbing the serenity of the place, reminding herself of why all this was so important. "You know, Emily," Jake said as they watched the sunrise over the fields, "sometimes we need to face a storm to prove the strength of our foundations. What you've built is solid. Trust in that." That afternoon, when Emily entered the TV studio for the debate, she carried with her not just facts and figures, but also the strength and conviction she had rediscovered at the ranch. The debate was intense. Her opponent was skilled, playing on the public's fears and prejudices. But Emily held firm. She spoke not just with her head, but with her heart, sharing real stories of lives transformed by the program, both in the countryside and in the city. Bridges of Tomorrow is not just a corporate project, she declared, looking directly at the camera. It's a vision of a future where economic development and environmental preservation go hand in hand, where the wisdom of the countryside and the innovation of the city complement each other. It's an invitation to rethink our relationship with the land and with each other. Her words resonated with the public. In the weeks that followed, a wave of support emerged. People from all over the country shared their own stories of how the program had impacted their lives and communities. Companies that had initially distanced themselves due to the controversy were now getting in touch, interested in participating. The crisis, though painful, had strengthened not only the program, but Emily herself. She emerged as an even more respected leader, someone capable of navigating turbulent waters without losing sight of her values and goals. One afternoon, weeks after the height of the crisis, Emily was back at the ranch sitting with Jake on the porch. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. "You know," said Emily, breaking a comfortable silence, "during all this turmoil there were moments when I thought of giving up, of going back to the safety of what I knew before." Jake looked at her expectant. "But then," she continued, "I remembered this place, the people we've met, the lives we're touching, and I knew I couldn't stop." Jake smiled, taking her hand. "That's why you're extraordinary, Emily. You don't just dream of a better world, you work tirelessly to make it a reality." In that moment, watching the sunset, Emily felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. The journey was far from over, and there would certainly be more challenges ahead. But she knew that, with allies like Jake by her side and the strength she had discovered within herself, she was ready to face any storm that might come. Bridges of Tomorrow wasn't just a program, it was a movement, and Emily was determined to guide it toward a brighter and more sustainable future for everyone. The rising sun painted the New York City sky with shades of pink and orange as Emily entered her office at Harrington Enterprises. It had been exactly 2 years since the launch of the Bridges of Tomorrow program, and the day promised to be special. On Emily's desk, a stack of reports awaited her attention. But these weren't ordinary reports, they were stories. Stories of executives who had rediscovered their purpose after weeks at partner farms. Stories of rural communities now thriving thanks to new skills and technologies learned. Stories of sustainable innovations born from the collaboration between city and countryside. As she leafed through the documents, a smile formed on Emily's lips. The program had grown beyond her most optimistic expectations. Now, not only were other American companies adopting similar models, but international delegations were coming to the United States to learn from Harrington's experience. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Nancy, her longtime friend and now the company's legal director. "Ready for the big day?" Nancy asked, an excited smile on her face. Emily nodded, feeling a mixture of anxiety and excitement. Today she would present to the board a bold proposal, expanding Bridges of Tomorrow to a global scale. The hours preceding the meeting passed in a blur of final preparations and last-minute revisions. When she finally entered the boardroom, Emily felt the weight of all eyes on her. But this time there was no apprehension in those looks, only expectation and respect. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emily began, her voice firm and passionate. 2 years ago we embarked together on a journey that many thought impossible or naive. Today I'm here to show not only that we were right, but that it's time to dream even bigger. In the 2 hours that followed, Emily presented her vision for the future of the program. Partnerships with companies and communities in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. A research institute dedicated to sustainable solutions born from collaboration between traditional knowledge and cutting-edge technology. An investment fund to support startups that aligned with the program's values. When she finished, a momentary silence took hold of the room. Then, to her surprise, the oldest member of the board, a man who had initially been one of the program's greatest skeptics, stood up and began to applaud. The others soon joined in, and Emily found herself in the middle of a standing ovation. The approval was unanimous. Bridges of Tomorrow was about to become a truly global movement. Hours later, exhausted but euphoric, Emily drove down the familiar road leading to Jake's ranch. She could hardly wait to share the news with him. She found him in the stable taking care of the horses. Seeing her, Jake's face lit up with a smile that made Emily's heart race. "From your smile, I'm guessing things went well in New York," he said, approaching to embrace her. Emily told him about the meeting, about the expansion plans, about the exciting future opening up before them. Jake listened attentively, his pride and admiration evident in every look. "You know what this means, don't you?" Jake asked when she finished. Emily looked at him intrigued. "It means that now, more than ever, we need to keep our feet firmly on the ground," he continued. "As the program grows, it will be even more important not to lose sight of what really matters: the people, the land, the connections we create." Jake's words touched Emily deeply. She knew he was right. Success brought new challenges, new responsibilities. "That's why I need you by my side, Jake," said Emily, taking his hands in hers. "Not just as a partner in the program, but in everything." Jake's eyes widened slightly, understanding the meaning behind her words. "Emily, are you sure? Your life is about to get even busier. With international travel, new responsibilities." "I'm sure," she interrupted him gently, "because in the midst of all this whirlwind, you are my safe harbor, my reminder of what really matters." That night, sitting on the ranch porch under a starry sky, Emily and Jake planned not just the future of Bridges of Tomorrow, but their future. A future that blended the dynamism of the city with the serenity of the countryside, professional ambition with personal growth. As they observed the horizon, where the distant lights of New York met the starry sky of the countryside, Emily felt a deep sense of accomplishment and expectation. The road ahead would be challenging, full of unknown obstacles and new frontiers to explore. But with Jake by her side, and with the strength she had discovered within herself, Emily knew she was ready for anything the future might bring. Together, they would continue building bridges between people, between worlds, between dreams and reality. And so, under the infinite sky of America, a new chapter was about to begin. A chapter of hope, transformation, and love. A chapter that promised not only to change their lives, but to touch countless others around the world. 5 years had passed since that starry night at the ranch, when Emily and Jake decided to unite their lives not only in love, but in a shared purpose. Time had brought changes, challenges, and triumphs that not even they could have predicted. Bridges of Tomorrow had transformed into a global movement, with branches in more than 30 countries. What began as an exchange program between executives and rural communities was now a complex ecosystem of interconnected initiatives, from educational programs to investment funds in sustainable technologies. Emily, now 40, found herself in a conference room in New York, about to give a speech at the UN about the global impact of the program. Looking out the window at the city skyline, she couldn't help but smile, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. Her phone vibrated with a message from Jake. "Remember who you are and why we started this. We're all rooting for you here at the ranch." Attached to the message was a photo that made Emily's heart fill with love. Jake holding their 3-year-old daughter Lily, both smiling in front of the sunset at the ranch. With renewed energy, Emily entered the packed UN hall. World leaders, CEOs, activists, and journalists all were there to hear about how an idea born in rural America was redefining the relationship between companies, communities, and the environment on a global scale. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emily began, her voice firm and passionate, echoing through the hall. 7 years ago, when we started Bridges of Tomorrow, we had no idea how far this journey would take us. We began with a simple premise, that true progress can only be achieved when we build bridges between different worlds, different perspectives. As EA, she spoke. Images were projected behind her. Sustainable farms in Africa, reforestation programs in the Amazon, clean technology startups in India, all direct or indirect fruits of bridges of tomorrow. Today we face global challenges that seem insurmountable: climate change, inequality, conflicts. But what we've learned is that solutions to these problems often come when we allow ourselves to learn from each other, when we value both ancestral wisdom and technological innovation. Emily shared stories of transformed lives, executives who rediscovered their purpose, rural communities that found new paths to prosperity, ecosystems restored thanks to sustainable practices. But our journey is far from over, she continued, her voice gaining intensity. What began as a program of a single company is now a call for a new way of thinking about global development, a call to recognize that we are all interconnected, countryside and city, north and south, present and future. Concluding her speech, Emily looked directly at the camera, knowing that Jake and Lily would be watching from the ranch. The future we dream of, a sustainable, fair and prosperous future for all, is not something distant and unattainable. It's being built now, bridge by bridge, connection by connection, and each of us has a role to play in this construction. The ovation that followed was deafening. World leaders stood up, applauding not just Emily, but the vision of a better future that she represented. Hours later, exhausted but fulfilled, Emily finally returned to her hotel room. A video call from Jake was waiting for her. "You were amazing, my love," he said with Lily waving excitedly by his side. "Mommy, are you going to save the world?" asked the little girl, her eyes shining with admiration. Emily laughed, feeling tears of emotion form. "Not alone, my love. All of us together are building a better world, one day at a time." That night, lying in the hotel bed, Emily reflected on her journey. From the insecure young executive she once was to the global leader she had become, from the boardrooms in New York to the fields of the countryside and now to the world stage. But amid all the success and recognition, she knew that her true wealth was in the connections she had made, the lives she had touched, and the love she shared with Jake and Lily. Bridges of Tomorrow had become much more than a corporate program. It was a testament to the power of collaboration, the importance of valuing different forms of knowledge, and the human capacity to create positive change when we work together. As sleep enveloped her, Emily smiled, thinking about the future. There were still so many bridges to build, so many lives to touch, so many challenges to overcome. But with love, purpose, and the strength of the connections she had created, she knew she was ready for anything tomorrow might bring. And so, that night in New York, with her heart at the ranch in America and her eyes turned toward a future of infinite possibilities, Emily fell asleep, dreaming of the new bridges she would build at dawn. Dear listeners, we hope that Emily and Jake's journey has touched your hearts and inspired reflections on the power of connections and the pursuit of a greater purpose. Bridges of Tomorrow may be fictional, but the lessons it brings are very real and relevant to the world we live in. If this story resonated with you, we invite you to explore more narratives that challenge our perspectives and inspire us to be agents of positive change. On our channel, you'll find a special playlist with equally captivating and transformative stories. Just click on the link to your left to discover more. Your journey of discovery doesn't need to end here. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your comments and feedback are valuable to us as they help us continue to bring content that touches hearts and minds. Every day we share unique stories that explore the complexity of life, the challenges of personal growth, and the power of love and determination. Don't miss our upcoming content. It may be exactly the inspiration you're looking for. Thank you for embarking on this journey with us. Remember, just like Emily and Jake, each of us has the power to build bridges and make a difference in the world. What will be the next bridge you build? We hope to see you in the comments, sharing your reflections and experiences. Until the next story.